Culp, and apologies from Councillor Whiteman.
And I know that there's illness has caused some of the problems, so our thoughts go with those people that are ill. Any disclosures of interest that anybody has for tonight? Is there anybody has any disclosures that they want to say? Okay. The next item are the minutes of the previous meeting, and these are the minutes that were of the meeting that were held on 7th of December 2022. I wasn't involved in those ones, so it's going to be that either those people that were involved are going to have to agree to those minutes, or we're just going to have to accept the minutes.
Chairman, I think there was nobody around the table, apart from possibly Councillor Day, who was present at that meeting. It is the responsibility, though, irrespective of that, for this committee to approve the minutes. Thank you.
Given that with that caveat, are you happy to accept the minutes as written? I assume everybody has read them. Okay, thank you. All right. The revisions to the timetable for preparing the South Warwickshire local plan, and that's on pages 15 to 28, and that's to consider a report. Now, what is the process that we're going to go through here? Are we going to have any proposals from officers about the contents of the papers?
Chairman, I think the usual practice is for the portfolio holders to introduce the report. As Councillor Couch's not present, I wonder if Councillor King could just run through the paper for us.
Councillor King, would you like to kind of run through what your position is on this? Could you make sure that you're actually on?
How's that? That's better. Councillor Rock and myself have both agreed this report that's has come forward. Anybody that wants to read a bit more about where we are at the moment, there is a consolidated consultation statement on the website. It's 298 pages long, but it's well worth the read. That's supposed to be funny. There are five main reasons for this proposed delay. The first one is the 2021 census got delayed, and that delayed the publication in the Coventry and Warwickshire Hedner report. That is obviously quite a significant detail here. There were also technical issues regarding the software compatibility of the two organisations, Warwick District Council and Stratford District Council. There have been various staffing issues with turnover and resourcing. Both councils have had new administration since May of this year, and of course hanging over all this work is the uncertainties of potential changes as regards to national planning policy. So all in all, it seemed, putting all these things together, that really this report was one that had to come forward and be submitted for consideration.
I just wonder whether we could have anything from officers about the potential delay to the MPPF. Have we had any clarity at all? Because I do know that there are some, even in the budget, there was some talk about planning changes, but has there been any indication from government about the national planning policy framework?
Well, Chair, I did hear a rumour that the MPPF was coming out later this month, but I don't know if that's true or not. I think the key point is there's two aspects to it. One is the MPPF and the potential changes around the standard method for housing as well as the green belt. That's one aspect, because that's there are two really significant aspects to plan making. And so I think clarity on where the direction of travel of the government going in those respects would be really helpful. I think the other uncertainty is with the Levelling Up Regeneration Act and what the new planning system will look like, and or rather how that will operate. I think we have a steer on again where it's going, but the detail around how that's going to really work, I think it's that really that's driving some of the delays and uncertainties with regard to the timetable. That is introducing a 30-month period for preparing a local plan, but we're not quite sure yet how that will work in detail. There's a suggestion that local authorities will go in waves in order for the planning inspectorate to be able to manage the process. We don't yet know what wave we might be in and when that will start. So again, there's a couple of different uncertainties, and I think clarity from government would be helpful. Thank you.
Has anybody got any particular questions that they want to ask about the paper as it's set out and the timetable and you know, any other queries that anybody wants to ask? Because yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Does that work? The basic thrust of it makes sense to me, but the delay in terms of the preferred option seems really rather long. I think it's 16 months or something like that from the previous one. So I understand reasons for some delay, but it seems really quite long. And of course, once you start having delays, there's a question, will it keep going? Will we then delay further? Because governments will change their mind. We know those sort of things happen. So whether, although accepting the broad thrust of this proposal, whether it can, particularly this next stage, be sped up a bit.
We do have the chairs of both overview and scrutiny committees from both councils. I don't know whether you've got anything you particularly want to address. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. The visiting team are going to get a run on. I'm in fact representing the Chair, Councillor Andrew Milton. I'm a member of Warwick's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We met on the 20th of November and the summary of the comments has been published. Essentially, the committee noted the recommendations in the report and thanked officers, obviously, for their work. And the committee requested that a briefing on the background for all councillors is provided early in the new year, explaining the stage that the plan has in fact reached and what future steps are planned. We're mindful of the number of new councillors, and I think we've got to see this as a long-term venture. So it's very important that everybody is up to speed, so to speak. And there was no actual meeting of the committee, so we did all this by way of email. They were the views expressed by the Overview and Scrutiny at Warwick District.
And the views of the Overview and Scrutiny at Stratford District Council. Councillor Crump.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Junid. We met in person. We were brave to meet in person on the 17th. Whether I like to come and see the chair and his wonderful puns, I'm not sure about that, but I do come. Very similar to some of the points that Councillor Day raised, and it's also been raised by a couple of councillors already about the timetable. We realised that being realistic, there be even further changes as well. But we realised there were things that were factored in so we can be flexible and responding to changing circumstances, which we felt was important. There was, again, making it clear about the focus being on providing suitable infrastructure. And I think that was important, but again, there was the need to work closely and negotiate with providers of the infrastructure. There was concerns about the actual adoption of the process before Overview and Scrutiny at Stratford recommended that all endeavours be made to ensure implementation of the plan within the current district council election, i.e. ahead of May 2027, because again, to ensure continuity and mitigate the risk of further delays. But again, there was also acknowledging the fact there could be a risk in adopting the plan immediately before an election. So it's also that was, damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes. Again, we were looking to make sure there was enough resources being put forward. Obviously, there had been originally a dedicated Safe Watcher local plan team, but now the wider planning policy teams have been brought in to contribute. So we think there's a much stronger approach towards a plan, and we're drawing on a wider range of skills, which we think is important. And then there was talk about technology, AI, systems of working, etc. as well. The other thing we were slightly concerned about, we needed to ensure that towns and parishes, particularly those with adopted neighbourhood plans, were involved and were aware of any implications and what had to do with their plans as well. So again, it took about communication and involvement at the earliest stage as possible. And yeah, and we got a commitment that future changes to any local plan, Safe Watcher local plan, would be reported back via here and also to the overview and scrutiny committees of Stratford and Warwick District Council. So we felt that was reasonable, and again, it's been transparent. So very similar, a few slight additions, and yeah, I think it was a good meeting. So thank you.
And it is worth noting that the two portfolio holders, but also the advisory group, the South Warwickshire Local Plan Advisory Group, which includes a number of ward councillors, which meets monthly, is supportive of the proposed approach as well. Have we got any other questions or any other comments that anybody wants to make? Ian? Councillor? Yeah, was Councillor Kennedy the first one? Yep. Yeah, I'm observed. Okay. Yep. No, Councillor Kennedy.
No, I'm happy to. Just a couple of points. I think I welcome the suggestion from Overview and Scrutiny of Warwick District Council. There should be a briefing for all councillors, because certainly talking to my fellow ward councillors who have recently been elected, it's very difficult to understand what's going on with this whole process, and the more that members can be informed, the better. So I think that would be very useful. The second thing is a sort of general point in thinking about whether we're waiting for new regulations like the NPPF to be revised, and then there will be other things. The new future home standard is going to emerge, we think, maybe in February, and then there may be an election and everything else changes. But my thought is that whatever regulations and whatever legislative environment we're working in, we still need to prepare a plan, and some of the basic principles, how that they may be presented differently, but we still need to go ahead and make those key decisions. So I hope that work will continue despite the delays, and we're not sitting around on our hands waiting for something to descend from Whitehall, because by the time it does, it'll probably change again.
I think you echo my sentiments as well, that we shouldn't sort of rely on changes. We have to get on. We don't want to be in a position where we've got a gap. But we're very lucky. We're very fortunate, both councils, that we've got the 5-year. We've got more than the 5-year land supplies. But we do need to make sure that there isn't a delay. Councillor Wally-Hoggins, and then I've got Councillor Bode. Sorry, my apologies. Councillor Bode, I think. Indicated first, then Councillor.
Yeah, that's very kind. Unfortunately, I wasn't at the steering group meeting, so I was mayoring or doing something. I couldn't get there. But I was interested to see that everyone seems to be going along, saying, well, we just carry on as things happen now. And there's legislation going on with the NPPF and other bits and pieces. But there's broader legislation which is due to come on timing of local plans and how they should be done. And clearly, if they're allowing 30 months to do the plan, where they normally take 5 to 7 years, there's a lot of stuff coming out of them. Now, what bothers me, having read through the reports, is you look at the timing plan we've now got, which is extended, you still fall into the date where you can't submit an old-style plan, allegedly. So we're doing a fair bit of work, but on the dates that you put forward, you overrun the date when the legislation changes by about a year or more, and it concerns me that we're doing all this work and we don't know what we're going to end up with, because we won't be able to submit the plan we're working on, judging by that data. Now, yes, there will be a government change, but everyone's saying planning's rubbish and you need to speed things up. So I don't suppose it's going to get any easier, whoever is running the government. So I'm just a little concerned that and I take what Ian's saying, you know, we need to speed things up. I'm just saying, we need to slow things down because we could be doing an awful lot of work that we don't want and don't need, because clearly there's going to be substantial changes coming through one way or the other. But it's those dates that bother me. If you look at the dates when we're planning to hit things, and look at the dates when the government currently says you won't be able to submit after this date, well, we're way past that before we even conclude what we're doing. So I'm a little concerned that we're rushing headlong and maybe shouldn't be. And I think that because of the time frame, there could be changes in sites coming forward or whatever. So I think it really ought to be slowed up a bit. Would be my view, but that's just my lone view.
I think officers can probably pick up on that piece, because I think that has been covered. Councillor Wally-Huggins.
Yes, thank you. I think we do need to be mindful that although we've had some reasonable reasons for why there is the delay in the timetable here, that we need to be really careful that although these are explanations, that they don't end up being excuses. Because what we need to be here is, and people are paid good salaries and there's a high level of expertise, is we need to be nimble to the changes that we're facing with this, because this is absolutely critical to all of our residents, and it's critical also to the residents that will be coming down the line in the future. So I ask this really, or say this, that it is important that you make the most of all of the resources available, which includes counsellors with a high level expertise who, frankly, have been thrown out of the bath like babies in the bathwater, really. So if you need to do that, then you ask other councillors that are used to doing this, and don't be afraid to do so, because this is a critical piece of work that affects all of us, and nobody wants to see unnecessary delays to this vital piece of work for both of our councils, and the working together towards it is that important. And I think that's why it's important that this is communicated properly and consistently to all new councillors, including those that find themselves sitting on this committee today. Thank you.
Okay, I take your point, and there shouldn't be, the delays. But in the end, we are not planning officers and trained as planning officers. So although we do our job as councillors, we have to rely on those that have got the professional qualifications as well. Councillor, Mr. Careford.
Thank you, Chair. If perhaps just come back on some of those points, and I'm sure Mr. Clark will want to do so as well. Councillor Davidson's points, I think it's in the report that what we've been told so far is that for the new system to operate, they need new regulations and they need to be laid before Parliament, and the clarity around that won't be known until next autumn. So really it's only from next autumn that we can really go with pace on the new plan, and it would need to be a new plan, as Councillor Bodes alluded to, because we don't think we can realistically hit, I think it's the June 25 deadline. So I think we need to be alive to that. Obviously, and this is Councillor Kennedy's point, that we're not sitting on our hands, and what we do need to ensure that we are using and making the most of the time we've got to carry on progressing the plan. Yes, there are things we don't know, but fundamentally the plan still needs to cover the same issues. It still needs technical evidence to underpin it. And there may be some wasted resource in terms of we don't need that particular study, or it didn't need to be done in that particular way, but fundamentally the issues still need to be addressed, and that's the work we'll still be doing. So it's, yeah, just give members that comfort that we're still working on the plan behind the scenes. We're not suggesting to pause it in any sense, and I think it's really risky when councils do pause plan making, because it often comes back to bite you when you do that. I think, and that addresses Councillor Wally-Huggins' point about being nimble to the changes, and absolutely we do need the buy-in of all councillors, because ultimately, it is it's your plan for the two councils, and if we don't get that buy-in, then it won't get adopted. So it's really critical that we do have that buy-in. We get the buy-in from councillors early on in the process, and councillors come in on this journey. Now, there will be difficult decisions, but it's our job as the lead officers on this to make sure that we're all moving on in the same direction with it. So hopefully I can give the comfort that, yes, there have been delays, and there's always a risk that they can be down as excuses, but I do think, and I'm sure Ms Clark will agree, that it's most likely the timetable will be revised again once we've got that certainty from government. But what we're saying is the current published timetable is out of date. We owe it to residents to give a more realistic timetable, and that's what we're doing, but with the caveat that it probably will change in the near future.
Mr Clark, do you want to say anything from the Warwick point of view?
Well, not so much from the Warwick point of view, but just to echo what John has said, and just to maybe emphasise one or two of the points made. There was a question asked, I think, by Councillor Davidson about the time it's going to take us to get to preferred options, and he said, it's next October we would be looking to bring something before this committee. Yes, we would like to do it sooner. If we can concertina that timescale, of course we will. We always keep that under review. John and myself and the two local plan managers meet every week to discuss these matters and keep the project on track. I think the point to bear in mind is that the preferred options is when we have to begin to make some really big crunch decisions, and that's when we set the strategy for the local plan. That's when we begin to say where the allocations are going to be and where the major changes are going to take place and what the strategy for the plan is going to be. And for that to come together, we won't have all of the evidence base that we need tied down at that point. But you wouldn't want us to come to you with a proposal for strategy unless we had most of it tied down. And that's I think, the key thing. So the next 12 months or so is going to be, in a sense, the key time in terms of the work that we're doing as officers, but also meeting with our local plan advisory group. And as you know, that we have an advisory group and we meet more or less monthly, about sort of 10 times a year. And we have met a number of times, I think it's 5 times, with the new committee since the election. So helping to bring them up to speed, and they'll be really important to that work. Just to pick up Councillor Bode's point about the deadline for delivering a plan under, I'll call it the old system before, and the deadline is actually we have to submit by June of 2025. And yes, I mean, the timetable we're putting forward doesn't meet that. That date is now in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which has been given royal assent. But as we say in the report, there's a lot of regulations and other guidance that needs to come from government before we can even start this. Never mind the wider political issues and the possibility of a local election. Sorry, not a local election, a general election. No local elections, thankfully. So there is so much that is uncertain that one thing, in one way, it would have been quite easy for us as officers to recommend to you, would have been to pause the plan and wait for all this to come forward. But as I'm hearing from you around the table, and as we concluded ourselves, we didn't think that was the right thing to do. And the work that we're doing, the joint working, the work with councillors, the evidence base that we're gathering is all taking us to a better place to deliver a sound local plan. And if we have to migrate it into the new system at some point, we're working very hard to make sure that isn't wasted effort. The very final thing I'd say is I've heard some calls for a all-councillor briefing on the local plan. I'm sure we'd be happy to do that. We were actually asked not to brief you new councillors too much too soon about the local plan, because we know very well that local councillors have had a lot of training and briefing sessions, and they wouldn't thank us for more than is necessary. But now that the new councils have been established for some while, John and I are happy to work with you to find a date where we can do that.
Thank you. I think that's one thing that we would all of us agree that briefing would be useful for councillors just to bring them up to speed. And the other comment is that as a long-standing councillor, I know to my with dismay, I remember what a pause actually can deliver for an area. It didn't end well in Stratford. So with that, could we ask for we've got a set of recommendations. I'll read the recommendations out first, and then I'll ask for a proposer and a seconder to those recommendations. And the recommendations are, number one, that members note the work that has been undertaken on the South Warwickshire Local Plan since the end of the public consultation on the issues and options paper in March 2023, and in particular the publication of the consultation statement. And number two, that members approve the revised timetable for preparing the South Warwickshire Local Plan attached as Appendix 2. Could I have a proposer? And I'm happy to second those recommendations, if that is okay from the chair. And then we need to...
I'm happy to propose, if it hasn't been
Okay,
done so already.
all right. And can we have an indication of which way you prefer to vote? Are you voting for are you agreed to the proposals and seconders that have been made, the recommendations that have been made? If you are, could you just indicate that you agree? Okay. Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and I look forward to more of these meetings. But the next one is, on the next page. Urgent business. Do we have any urgent business from anybody before we close the meeting? No urgent business? Then I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much indeed for your time.